Hey, welcome! Today we are diving deep into a really wild story at the heart of Europe's energy policy. It's a massive paradox, right? Where what politicians are saying and what's actually happening on the ground are two totally different things. We're talking about France, Russia, and a whole lot of gas. So let's just get right to it. The big question: is France cutting off Russian gas? I mean, given everything that's been going on since 2022, you'd think the answer would be a pretty straightforward yes, wouldn't you? Well, surprise, surprise, it's nowhere near that simple. And that complication, yeah, it has a price tag, 2.68 billion euros. That's how much French companies have shelled out for Russian liquefied natural gas, or LNG, just in 2024. You heard that right, billions. So what on earth is going on here? All right, let's get into the weeds a bit, because to really understand this, you got to follow the money and you got to follow the data. While the gas that used to flow through pipelines from Russia has basically dried up, another kind of Russian gas has been quietly flooding in to fill the gap.
And look, the sheer scale of this is what's just staggering. Russian LNG now makes up over a third, a full 34% of all the LNG that France imports. This has vaulted Russia to become France's #2 gas supplier, sitting right behind the United States. It's a complete flip of the energy landscape.
Now, to be fair, France isn't alone in this, but boy, is it leading the charge. Get this. France, Spain, and Belgium, just those three, account for a whopping 87% of all the Russian LNG that came into the EU this year, and France is sitting right at the top of that list. And this chart, it just lays it all out, crystal clear. Just look at that gap between France and the next country, Spain. We're talking almost €1 billion more. It's not even close. France has become the single most important gateway for Russian gas coming into Europe by sea. So you've got to be asking, right? How? How is this even possible? Well, it all comes down to this perfect storm of three things: a huge legal loophole, some pretty serious economic handcuffs, and frankly, a big logistical advantage. Think of it like a three-legged stool holding this whole trade up. First, and this is the big one, there are 0 EU sanctions on Russian gas. Second, French companies are locked into these ironclad long-term contracts. And third, France just happens to have the perfect port setup to handle all this traffic. And here's the kicker. All of this, it's completely legal. When the EU brought the hammer down with sanctions on Russian oil and coal, it made a very deliberate, very strategic choice to leave natural gas off the list. And that created this massive loophole that companies have been sailing right through. And this is where you see this incredible clash between political promises and, well, the hard reality of business. You have President Macron back in 2022 making this big, bold promise to get France completely off Russian gas. But at the exact same time, you have the French energy giant Total Energies stuck in a massive contract with Russia's Novatek that doesn't run out until 2032. So what's the official word from the government? Well, listen to this. The French energy minister talks about a concern for legal certainty. What they're basically saying is, hey, if we force our companies to break these contracts, they could get sued for billions by Russia, and we're not sure we want to risk that. It's a huge factor holding them back. But hold on, because the story gets even weirder. A huge chunk of this gas isn't even for France. Nope, a lot of it is just passing through. France has basically become this giant transit hub, a critical engine for shipping Russian gas out to the rest of the world. Okay, to get this next part, you need to know one key word: transshipment. See, the Russian LNG comes out of the Arctic, so it needs these super specialized, super expensive tankers that can break through the ice. But those ships are not great for long trips, so they have to pull into a port and move the cargo to a regular ship. That sounds complicated, but it's really just a simple three-step dance. First, the Russian icebreaker tanker pulls into a French port like Dunkirk. Second, the LNG gets pumped over to a normal tanker waiting nearby. And third, that new ship takes off to deliver the gas wherever it needs to go. Could be somewhere else in Europe or halfway around the world. So what this whole process does is it essentially launders the origin of the gas. The moment that LNG passes through a French port, it's officially inside the EU's market. That means it can then be sold to other countries, like Germany, for example, who can say they aren't buying directly from Russia, even if the molecules in their pipes started out there. So yeah, as you can probably guess, not everyone in the EU is thrilled about this. It's actually creating some really deep splits within the alliance. And there's a huge debate raging about what to do, or if they should do anything at all to finally close this loophole.
So what's the plan to fix this? Well, let's look at the timeline. But spoiler alert, it's a bit messy. Coming up in March 2025, a new rule will stop these re-exports to countries outside the EU. But that does nothing to stop imports for use inside the EU. Then there's this goal for 2027 to end all Russian gas imports, but it's just a goal. It's not legally binding. And of course, that monster Total Energies contract is still on the books until 2032.
And this just shows you how divided the EU really is on this. You've got the biggest importers, France and Belgium, saying, whoa, slow down, because they're worried about those contracts. Then you have others like Spain and the Netherlands who are more open to a ban. And then countries like Hungary are flat out against it. It's a classic case of an alliance that can't agree. You know who has a really interesting take on this? The CEO of Total Energies himself, the company right in the middle of it all. He's pretty blunt. He says, sure, Europe could handle a ban, but not right now. He argues it would only be possible if there are rock-solid guarantees of new gas coming from places like the US and Qatar to replace it. For him, it's simple. You find the alternative first, then you cut the cord.
And that really brings us to the heart of the whole issue, doesn't it? It all boils down to this incredibly tough question. When you're trying to guarantee your energy security, keep the lights on, keep factories running, where do you draw that line between what is practical for your economy and what is right based on your political principles? It's a question Europe is desperately trying to figure out, and right now, there are no easy answers.